Welcome to Money Sense. I'm Jean Range, Wealth Advisor at Ellenbecker Investment Group. My phone number, if you want to reach me, is 262-691-3200. With that, I'm going to get into today's topic. And what's kind of interesting with today's topic is I'd like to extend an invitation to everybody listening to today's show. This is a very personal invitation that will affect all facets of your life, both personal and professionally if you're still active in the workforce. If you accept my invitation, it could actually be life-altering. My invitation to all today is an invitation to learn how to thrive in life as opposed to survive in life. Sure, we all have days where we're in survival mode. However, we should not feel as if every day we are in survival mode. I think we could all agree that not thriving creates so much negativity in our lives at so many levels. Personally, the impact can result in higher divorce rates, difficulty balancing home and work life, and the list goes on. So with that, the invitation that I extend to everybody, what does it entail? Well, my goal today is to have a discussion and provide some insight on what you can do to start thriving in life. Sure, this is a pretty big goal, but it is the start of a conversation to learn about the art and science of thriving. Today, we're going to learn how to use tools of science in order to master the art of thriving. With that, I want to extend a warm welcome to our guest today, Dr. Donna Stoneham, who's a certified integral coach. And Donna, I'm going to have you, I think you can do your bio. Share with our listeners your history and what brought you to this point.
Well, it's such a joy to be on your show today, Jean. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation. I've got my coffee here, and I'm ready to go.
Good.
So I have been in the business of helping people reach their potential for the last 25 years. I've worked primarily as an executive coach and leadership development expert, mostly in corporations. I've done some not-for-profit work. But, ever since I was little, I have always been really interested in what helps people move from being survivors to being thrivers. And I'm sort of a self-development junkie myself. I've been doing personal development work for more years than I'd like to admit. But I think it's, the real place to start in doing the work on ourselves that will help us to thrive is developing self-insight. So I try to act as a guide and support system for the clients I work with. I've worked with several thousand leaders and executives and teams in organizations, a wide range of organizations over the years. I've been in the business about 25 years, and I love it. It's great. I can't believe I get paid to do it.
Well, that is the best thing when you can get paid for something you're passionate about. That's what I call living the dream.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you used a phrase, self-insight. It begins with self-insight. What exactly is self-insight?
Well, I think it's being able to take a really honest look at ourselves and appreciate what our strengths are and how we can bring those to light in the world to help make the world a better place. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's really what it's about is, how do we, my brand and my business is a ripple. And I use that because I do believe that our lives are created in order to cast a ripple effect in the world, hopefully for good. That's it. That's the point. So the more we can learn about both our strengths and how to cast that ripple out in the world, as well as the opportunities we have for development and our blind spots that keep us from, being the best we can be and being the brightest star that we can shine in the world. That's what I define as self-insight, both knowing what our strengths are as well as our opportunities for development, and then doing something about that.
And, we made reference, or you made reference to mentoring executives and coaching individuals in the workforce. You could actually put some of the things we're going to talk about in play in your personal life as well with your family. So when you talk about your world, my world could be my world at work, it could be my world at home, and the world in my community.
Absolutely. I don't see any of those as separate, and I think that's where people get in trouble. A lot of the time, I call it work drag. So a lot of people will put on a suit, and usually a suit of armor, when they're in a particular place in their life at work, and then they'll try to be somebody different at home, and you can only pull that off for so long. And what I find in my practice is when you get better at home, you get better at work. When you get better at work, you get better at home.
Good to know. And again, having read the book and really reflected on the contents, it made me look at my world, work and home, very different. In fact, when I was preparing for the show and reading the book, it said to sit back and don't read this book over the weekend. It should be a 6-month process, or 3 to 6 months, to really reflect and try and put things into play, and reflect on some of the questions that you broach in some of the topics. But in fact, I want to share, you get quite personal in the book, where you share about a period in life where you weren't thriving. In fact, you were going through a short period of depression. And that really made the personal part of this book touch, to really see how you took that challenge and you turned it into something positive. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I think that I certainly had periods of depression when I was growing up, in my adolescence and early 20s. And I think that, like many other people, I felt a bit mismatched I was a poet when I was like 13. You don't find a lot of poets at 13. So there was a whole sort of internal world I had that didn't match the external surroundings. And so I didn't ever really feel like I fit in, which created some of that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had another period in my late 30s when I got very ill. And I was sick for about 3 years and not able to work very much at all during that time. And it was the best gift I could have ever been given, because it really forced me to look at my life and look at myself. It was painful, and I wouldn't want to have to repeat it, but I'm so grateful for it now in retrospect, because it really forced me to look at what I call the false self, and that sort of persona that we create to try to get by in the world and have people like us and adore us and appreciate us, when maybe what we're doing isn't who we're really called to be. So that was a huge wake-up call for me and changed so much in my life in terms of how I took care of myself and even the work I did in the world. It was a big shifting point for me.
So you use that as a period which really took you from being a survivor to a thriver. Define the word thrive. What does that mean to you?
So I have a kind of long-winded description of it in my book, which I won't bore you with, but I really think of thriving as our ability to flourish wherever we're planted. And we're coming up on springtime now, and people are coming out of their houses and taking off their winter boots, and sometimes having to put them back on when they don't want to. But it's about, what do you do with what you're given in this moment right now? And what's the mindset and the attitude you want to have about whatever situation you're in, and how can you really make the best of what is? And to me, people who thrive, and the last chapter of my book, I mentioned several people who have tremendous obstacles, physical health challenges, cancer, loss of loved ones, etc. But they're able to take that and use it as an opportunity to transform and to heal and to grow and to give back. And, I think at the end of the day, what it's really about is how do we pay it forward? How do we make a difference in the lives of those we serve and in the lives of the people we love?
Well, and when you say how do we pay it forward, it always reminds me of going through the McDonald's drive-through with my daughter, where it's kind of fun to pay the person behind you in the car on their bill. So when they come up to the window, they get this free meal. And I always say, just tell them to pay it forward. It's all about giving back to the community. And what was interesting is the last time we did that, it was an older couple. And they were just tickled to death. You could just tell they were smiling and waving at us, and you could tell we made a huge impact on their life for just that small little thing of buying somebody's lunch.
Yeah, it's really, or paying somebody's toll. I mean, what does that cost? Well, I live in California, so it costs $5 or $6. But it's like it's not a big deal. Or grabbing an extra cup of coffee when you go stop by Starbucks on your way to work and bringing it to a coworker. It's the unexpected kindnesses that make a huge difference.
Well, and it impacted my daughter's day. I mean, she was smiling the whole day, and she did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember I'm a donor of an organization in Berkeley that does eye care in developing countries called Seva Foundation. And I was on a trip with them one time in Nepal. And there were these little girls, these little schoolgirls who were following us around, and you could tell they really lived in poverty. Someone had on what looked like her father's shoes or her brother's shoes that were way too large for her, and dirty shirts and ties, but they had their little school uniforms on. And they kept following us and following us. And I reached in my pocket to give her money, and she said, "I don't take money. We're children. We don't take money. But we want a book." And I was like, okay. So they took us to the bookstore. They wanted to buy an English Nepali dictionary so they could learn English. And it cost me $10. And I have to tell you, that is the best $10 I've ever spent in my entire life.
And you're going to hold that story close to your heart for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. And they're going to know that somebody far across the world cared enough about them to do that for them. And so, it doesn't get better than that.
So when you think about it, what helps people move from surviving to thriving? When you went through your periods where you were surviving, what helped you turn that into a thriving moment? And if we have any listeners that are just surviving in their current day, whether it be their work or their home life, what can we do to share with them to give them some action items to thrive?
Well, first of all, I think what's really required when we talked about self-insight, and one of the pieces of self-insight that's really important is to really pay attention to your mindset. So it's how you see the world. And I think the difference between thrivers and survivors tend to see the world as the glass is half empty, and survivors see the world as the glass is half empty, and thrivers tend to see it as the glass is half full. So survivors tend to be more fear-based, and I have a model in my book that talks about that people that are living in a survivor mode tend to think about the world and see the world from a more past and future-focused lens. So they tend to regret things that happened in the past and worry about things that are going to happen in the future. And I believe it was Wallace Black Elk, don't quote me on that, but one of the Native American elders who said, worrying is praying for things you don't want. And so it's almost like we set ourselves up when we're worrying for those very things sometimes to happen. The other thing about thrivers that's different is thrivers tend to trust in the flow of life, and they tend to be present in the moment. And survivors also tend to be people who want to seek to control and not let go of things. And thrivers tend to trust that things are going to work out, and they trust that life has a certain ebb and flow to it, and we have to be willing to step into that. And then thrivers tend to see life through a lens of what I call possibilities and opportunities, whereas survivors tend to see it more as a lens of obstacles and limitations. So I say that to say it's important to look at how do you see the world? What do you think about most of the time? Because what you think about will usually illuminate what your belief systems are.
So I'm going to take you down an avenue that you might be surprised. I have a 15-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
and social media is huge in
Yes.
this world, even for adults, whether
Yes.
it be, Facebook or Instagram or, all those other items. When you say survivors tend to live in the past control where thrivers are looking to the future, do you find that more people today are survivors than thrivers? And I'm going to pull this back to social media because everything on social media is a moment in time or history. Today's kids don't have things that they work with that put them into the future. And I'm going to say, if you look at your favorite sports team, we're always looking for the next game, the next season. It's always future based. So much of our kids' world is a moment in time or past where that's their world with social media.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My feeling about social media, and I will be the first person to admit I struggle with it too. It's like contemporary crack, for a lot of people. I mean,
Right.
it's including me. I mean, that's something I really have to watch and pay attention to and wean myself from. And I notice when I'm not on it as much, I feel better. I think that, unfortunately, in our climate right now, especially in the United States, there's a lot of fear. And there's a lot of, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, there's a lot of fear. And it's easy to buy into that. And so I think that's, there are certain things you have to do. It's like garbage in, garbage out. Pay attention to how much social media you're consuming. Pay attention to how much TV you watch. Pay attention to how much time you're outdoors or exercising or getting some kind of enjoyment and fulfillment, like going for a walk with your family instead of sitting down and watching a TV show. Those are the kind of things that we have to calibrate how much we're taking in. And as a mom of a teenager, I know that's a big struggle and very tough to be able to do. But to look at the things that you can do during the time that you have him in your home, like family dinners or even family movie nights, or things that are enjoyable and take you out of and take him out of that frenzied sort of social media world.
Yep, that's why we call Facebook fake book in our family.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I think we'll take a break. And then when we get back, we're going to learn more about Donna and her book, which is titled The Thriver's Edge. And it's won quite a few awards. So with that, let's take a break. Welcome back to Money Sense. I'm Jean Range, Wealth Advisor at Ellenbecker Investment Group. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Ellenbecker Investment Group, visit our website, ellenbecker.com. Today, we have an exciting guest. Her name is Dr. Donna Stoneham, and she is the author of the book called The Thriver's Edge. And I can see it won an award. It was the Indie Excellence Finalist Book Award. I had the pleasure of reading this, and I have two neighbors that can't wait for me to be done with this interview so I can give them the book because I was sharing how impactful it was on my personal and my professional life as well. So this has been a God wink that I was given an opportunity to even talk with you, Donna.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear that. That makes my day.
Good, good. I'm going to refer to the book where you make reference to Jonah's journey. And anybody who knows the biblical story of Jonah, and you carry this story throughout the book. Share with our listeners the parallels and why you chose this story as a reference point throughout the entire book. And maybe let's go back and share them. If you're not sure what the Jonah story is, why don't you share with our listeners what that story is?
Sure. So the reason why I picked the Jonah story really is because the same reason that I wrote the book. And when I was before I even wrote the book, I was on my way to a movie one night, and I was listening to this beautiful song by this bluegrass singer named Laurie Lewis. And I listened to the lyrics, and I literally started to weep. And I realized in that moment that I had this book that I needed to get out in the world. And this is actually the third book I've ever written, but I never published the other two because I was afraid. I was afraid to put them out. I was afraid they wouldn't be good enough. That's sort of been my deal. You know, is it going to be good enough? And the Jonah story spoke to me because the story of Jonah is Jonah's given this task by God to go out and share with in Nineveh, who were actually his enemies, to share God's message with them and what God wanted them to do. And he came up with every excuse in the book for why he couldn't do it. He didn't see himself as capable. So that is a reason that I picked that story, and I picked it also because of Abraham Maslow, who came up with the story of what he called the Jonah complex. And Maslow talked about that we're as afraid to succeed as we are to fail. And the reasons for that are that either one, we fear the responsibility that would involve if we were successful beyond our wildest dreams. Who would we have to take care of? What would people expect of us? Those kinds of questions. Another reason is that we fear rejection. So we fear if we really put ourselves out there that people won't like us, or they won't like what we have to say, or they'll think we're too big, or as I grew up in Texas, too big for my britches, you know. The third fear is that we're afraid we'll be completely overwhelmed. Like if we're successful, then what's going to happen in terms of the rest of our lives? Are we going to be able to manage it? We're going to be able to manage all the additional things we don't have to while we're flying under the radar. And the fourth fear is what Maslow called the fear of, actual disintegration. He called it looking at the sun. So it's like what happens when you look at the sun and your eyes just can't take it, right? So you literally, you fear you're just going to, have a breakdown or disappear. And the last one is the fear of being perceived as being arrogant or narcissistic. So it's like, God forbid you put yourself out there, like Jonah, putting himself out there as an orator when he was a shopkeeper. What would people say about him? They would think he was arrogant. Who are you to think that you can, tell God's message to us? So I thought that Maslow's Jonah complex, and he talks about he called it the Jonah complex, and the story had so many parallels to our human journey. That's why I used it.
Well, and that comes to that phrase, we're our worst enemy. Mm-hmm. When you look back, we always critique ourselves so much more than anybody else would.
Yeah, I call it, in my book, are we going to listen to the inner critic, or are we going to listen to the inner champion?
Right. It's
and we have to develop those, I think.
Right. When you put that outfit on, you look in the mirror, and sometimes you look for everything that's looking wrong in the outfit versus how great it looks.
And the interesting thing is, and I think this is helpful for people to know, that they've done some scientific studies, and they've actually have shown that we're about 6 times more likely to hold on to the negativity than the positivity. So, for instance, Rick Hansen, who's a wonderful author, wrote a book called Buddha's Brain. He talks about that negativity is like Velcro and positivity is like Teflon. So we actually have to develop the voice of our inner champion because it's not normal and natural. We tend to veer towards the negative.
Well, I can relate to that when I work with my clients. They'll remember the one quarter their performance was poor, but never the years of great performance. So I say that joking, but it does happen. But
right.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and when we get back, we're going to learn about some of the keys and some of the talents you need to acquire to become the thriver that we all desire to be. So with that, Welcome back to Money Sense. I'm Jean Range, Wealth Advisor at Ellenbecker Investment Group. I can be reached at 262-691-3200. Today we're having this great conversation with Dr. Donna Stoneham, learning about thriving in our world, whether that world is in our work life, our home life, or our community life. And we're going to get into the meat of the topic where we're going to talk about the 7 keys that she makes reference to in her book. Her book is titled The Thriver's Edge. I encourage everybody to go out and buy this book. It can be applicable at all different lives. Maybe you've got a college kid who's not sure what direction they want in life, or maybe you're living Monday through Friday and you need a little more oomph in your life. I'm going to encourage you to buy that book. But Donna, let's jump right into some of the 7 keys. And the first one is trust. And throughout the book, it's clear that you need to practice skills to be successful at trust. How do you practice trust, and why is it so important?
Well, in my experience, both personally and also professionally, if you don't have trust, you really don't have a foundation to operate off of to thrive. And I think that trust is 3-pronged. I think it's trusting in yourself. I think it's trusting in the positive intent of others, and really trying to, even if you've been betrayed in your life, really believing that most people do have positive intent. And then I also think it's being able to trust in something larger than ourselves. And that is, for different people, different things and how they hold. You know, it can be a spiritual connection, it can be family. Whatever it is, it's beyond yourself that you can trust in. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do is to do what I call a circle of trust. And that's to actually get a piece of paper and write down, who do you really trust that's in the center of your world? And it may just be a few people. I mean, who do you know will always have your back? In the next circle, who are the people you think would have your back that you could trust, but you're not absolutely 100% certain? And the third circle would be people you would hope would have your back and that you could bring into a more trusting relationship, but they're kind of outliers. And I encourage people to do their best to try to move 2 or 3 people into the next circle inside the circles. So you're the folks that you trust most deeply. What can you do to create the kind of and cultivate the kind of relationships with them to bring them in one circle closer? And so that you're constantly expanding the people you trust in your world and in your life.
You know, another key that you talk about is humility. And you make reference that humility is conveyed through our capacity to refrain from judging ourselves and others, to believe that most people have the right intentions. This reminds me of that poem from Bob Perkins, because you talk about we should trust that we are all trying to do our best and are enough just as we are. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've heard the Bob Perkins poem, I Wish You Enough.
Oh, I haven't, but I want to find it.
It's great. Good. I wish you enough sunshine to keep your attitude bright.
I have heard that. Yes.
Yep. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun, and it even gets into I wish you enough loss to appreciate all that you possess, and I wish you enough hellos to get you through the final goodbyes of life. The poem is much more than that, but I think everybody gets the sense of having enough.
Yeah.
Share with us about your grandmother. And this story was very personal to me because my child has such a great relationship with her grandmother. And the reason she has this great relationship is the grandmother is able to be present in every moment with my child.
Yes.
And share with us a little bit about your grandmother.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at her picture on my desk. My grandmother she had an 8th grade education. She was actually at one point on a wagon train. I grew up in Texas. She was from Arkansas, a family of sharecroppers, and met my grandfather while she was working on his farm. She is absolutely the most I learned unconditional love from my grandmother, and I learned about presence and love and humility. She is my main star in life in terms of who I want to emulate. And I've met a lot of famous people in my life, and there's no one that I've ever met who touched my life any more than she did. So I think it's important for us all to know we never know when we're going to be that person for someone else. So I call it confident humility. It's being confident in our abilities and owning them and stepping into them, but being humble in how we present ourselves. And I think that combination is very, very powerful.
Do you think that a parent could ever replace this cherished role of a grandmother with this unconditional love to that level?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do have several friends who talk about their relationship with their kids. Now, it's usually not when they're teenagers. I'll put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, but when they get a little bit older and they've been out in the world, there's a beautiful, sort of simpatico that can develop between a parent and a child. So I think it's harder when you're in the day-to-day and you're having to, grandparents have a great role. They're there just strictly to love. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily to discipline and a lot of the other things that parents have to do.
Right.
Yeah. She's definitely, my grandmother still comes about once a year in a dream and gives me something amazing that I need.
How amazing is that?
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Let's talk about resilience. What is it and how does it help us thrive? I love your analogy of the bamboo and oak. Mm-hmm. And, let's not keep that analogy a secret. Why don't you share with our listeners?
Well, bamboo is really able to bend and move. It doesn't look very strong, but it's incredibly resilient. It can also, we had it in our backyard for a long time, and it was like the bane of our existence because it just kept growing and growing and growing no matter what you did to get rid of it. And that's kind of what resilience is. And one of the things, I guess it was about a year or so ago, I was actually in Milwaukee doing a show for Morning Blend, and I did something I call my SOS, Ways to Cultivate Resilience. So resilience, in my definition, is how do you pop back up when you've been defeated or disappointed, and how do you take care of yourself in a way that's going to not let your tank run empty. And I think particularly mothers run into this a lot more than others that I find, and that is we just think if we keep giving and giving and giving and giving that we're doing the right thing. But you know what they say on an airplane, if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you can't take care of your child.
Right.
So we've got to always be filling up our own well to be able to have something to give to others. So my SOS is, number one, for self, what is just one thing that you can do each day to take care of yourself that nurtures and sustains you?
Good advice.
Doesn't have to take a lot of time. It
right.
can be stopping and buying yourself flowers on the way home from work, or taking a hot bath with candles in your bathroom, or whatever it is that helps nurture and sustain you, just one thing a day. The second thing is others in the SOS, and that's what relationships do you need to cultivate or build to create a healthy network of support around you so you don't feel like you're in everything alone.
Yep, it comes to that. Who's on your bus?
Who's on your bus, yeah, and who do you want to have there? And the third one is setting boundaries and making sure that we're setting appropriate boundaries. That has probably been my biggest lesson since the book came out, because I've had so many opportunities that I didn't necessarily have before, and I've had to say no to some of them because I just didn't have the time. So it's learning where do you need to set your boundaries so that you can take care of yourself.
Wow, so much information. We're going to take a little break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the other keys and give you a little more insight here on thriving in life. With that, let's take a break. Welcome back to Money Sense. Jean Range, Wealth Advisor at Ellenbecker Investment Group. And we've had this great conversation with Donna Stoneham, who's a certified integral coach. And the book we're referring to is called The Thriver's Edge. Again, I encourage everybody to go out and buy that. Donna, I was going to close with you sharing your resources and the way you touch individuals. We'll do it again at closure, but why don't you take a moment and share some exciting news about your Facebook page?
Yes, well, we're actually going to be launching a Thriver's Edge community. It'll probably go live in about a month. Wanted to try to time it with spring. And so my Facebook page is Donna Stoneham, Stoneham, PhD, Donna Stoneham, PhD. And if you go to the Facebook page, there's a place there where it says click here, and you can sign up there for my Monday Tips to Thrive. And those come out every other Monday. And there's a practice for thriving that you'll get every other Monday at no cost. And then I will send out the notice through that mailing list about the beginning of the Facebook group starting. So I'm creating that as a place for people to really sit down and talk about with each other virtually what their struggles are, what their challenges are, and every couple of weeks I'll be offering a video with a new practice as well.
How exciting. Let's get back to some of the keys to becoming a thriver. And the next key that I thought we'd address is called inner direction, really your personal compass. Why do we have such difficulty following our inner voice?
I don't know the answer to the question of why, but what I do know is that most of my clients, and certainly in my own experience, 95% of the time when I do, I make the right decision. And I know I was listening to an interview with Karen and Julie that was out in January that they did, and that was one of the things Karen was talking about. She said when your intuition speaks, you need to listen, and I think that is so true. But it is harder to do than we give ourselves credit for sometimes. So trusting your gut is one of the best things you can do. And in my book, I have several different practices to help you do that.
Well, and that's just like the next key of trusting your vision.
Yes, absolutely. And I call it walking into your vision one step at a time. So sometimes we get overwhelmed with where we want to go in our lives, so we just get paralyzed and we don't move. And one of the things I encourage people to do is just one step at a time. It can be a tiny step, one tiny thing you can do that's going to move you a little bit closer to where you want to go in your life.
Right. Another key is expansiveness. And how would one even unlock the door to live a more expansive life? And what does that mean?
So when I talk about expansiveness, I use the analogy of seeing the world through a soda straw. So there's a big world out there, and some of us sometimes, and especially when we're under stress, we tend to look at the world through a soda straw. And you can't see very much of it when that's what you're looking through. So it's beginning to learn again back to self-insight and self-awareness, how to ask yourself the questions. Okay, this looks like I've just lost my job. This looks like the most horrible thing that's happened to me. But what can I do here to use this as an opportunity to grow and to thrive and to move maybe into a new place I've never thought about before? That's opening up the blinders from the soda straw. So I think that's really, really important. It's just being aware of when are we looking at life through a soda straw and when are we really seeing all the possibilities that are out there.
Well, and the final key is responsibility. And we live in a world that blames everyone and everything when things don't go as planned. We almost live in a culture of blame.
Yes, we do. We do. I mean, it's like all over the news right now. So it is absolutely true. And I use what I call, are you going to be the driver in your life or are you going to be the passenger? And in my book, I present a model. I call it living above the waterline. So, when you're in a thriver's mindset, you assume personal responsibility and you act as a causal agent in the world. So everything that is within your control, you try to do something about, realizing not everything is. But a lot of times we just kind of give up, and we put ourselves in that passenger seat, and we live at the consequence of the world around us, as opposed to being in charge of it. And this can be as simple, literally. I've been thinking about this a lot myself, is when do you turn off social media? You know?
Right.
If you're just sitting around feeling worse and worse and worse about what you're reading, then you're really being in a survivor mindset. You're not being a thriver. You're not taking the responsibility to turn it off and do something that's going to help you feel better.
So we've talked a lot about thriving, and I have to ask this. Is there ever a time when surviving trumps thriving?
Yes, and I want to make one point that I think is really important, that I think thriving is a privilege for many. And if you are a single mother with 3 kids just trying to get by and make do, it is very hard to thrive. It doesn't mean you can't work on your, with your mindset to help it be better. But I think it's important to understand that. That's also where I think it's important for all of us to give back and to pay it forward. So that if you see somebody who isn't thriving, how can you help them get there? So surviving, I think, happens more when we're really under stress, when we're sick, when we're going through a loss. It can feel like that. So it's paying attention to your mood and how can you elevate yourself and get yourself back above the waterline. Who do you need to call to kind of cheer you up, or what's a belief you need to look at that may be holding you back? Those are the things that often happen, but it's usually when we're really stressed.
Well,
it's slide back into survivor.
It's interesting because when I work with clients and they retire, sometimes retirement isn't all that it was dreamt to be. And we go through a process of really helping a client determine what's important to them, both in their family and their community, and creating a vision through some photos of what that picture really looks like. And it's taking them into a new mindset and helping them reframe what retirement looks like. So where
do they want to spend their time and energy? Yeah, that's being responsible.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to give you a moment, Donna, to, again, share the tips and the resources that our listeners can get access to reach you. So if you want to share that again, that'd be great.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, I encourage people to buy the book. It's called The Thriver's Edge, 7 Keys to Transform the Way You Live, Love, and Lead. And that's at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You can also order it through your local bookstore. And then I want to also encourage you to like our Facebook page and sign up for the Monday Tips to Thrive, and that's at Donna Stoneham, Ph.D. And you'll see the link there, and I'll be happy to put you on the list for the Monday Tips to Thrive. And if you want some articles and interviews on thriving, go to my website, donnastoneham.com/press. And there's a whole lot of articles there and some interviews and videos, et cetera, that may be helpful. And if you want to know where you are on the Thriving Continuum, go to donnastoneham.com to the Movement tab, and there's a quiz that you can take. So those are just a few resources right out of the gate, and I encourage you to take advantage of them because they're all at no cost to you except for the book.
Perfect. With that, again, thank you for being on the show. I hope everybody learned a few items here. And with that, I'd like to say, remember, before we plan, before we advise, before we invest, we always listen. With that, be well and have a great day.